A corroded lump of bronze sat forgotten in an Athens museum for half a century. It was a piece of a larger artifact recovered from an ancient shipwreck, dismissed as uninteresting for decades. Yet this object, known as the Antikythera Mechanism, is now understood as the world's first known mechanical computer, a device of staggering complexity built in ancient Greece. By the end of this story, you will see how a single find forces us to rewrite the entire timeline of human technological achievement. How did a civilization 2,000 years ago build a machine that modeled the cosmos? And why was such genius lost to history for over a millennium? What does it say about our own assumptions that the most advanced minds of the early 20th century could not initially comprehend what they were looking at? The year was 1900, and a crew of Greek sponge divers was battling a fierce storm in the Aegean Sea. Seeking shelter near the rocky island of Antikythera, one of the divers, Elias Stadiotis, plunged into the surprisingly deep water below. What he saw in the dim blue light was not a reef but a haunting tableau. A bronze arm reached up from the sediment as if from a sunken giant. Around it lay the ghostly forms of marble statues, their features smoothed by centuries under the sea. The men had accidentally discovered an ancient Roman merchant ship, a colossal vessel that had sunk around 60 years before the Common Era, while carrying a fortune in looted Greek art and luxury goods back to Rome. The subsequent salvage operation was the first major underwater archaeology effort in history, and it was perilous. One diver lost his life to decompression sickness, and another was paralyzed, a tragic reminder of the risks taken in the name of discovery. Yet the treasures they hauled to the surface were breathtaking. Exquisite bronze and marble sculptures emerged, along with glassware, coins, and jewelry. Amidst this glittering haul was a less glamorous find. A lump of heavily corroded bronze and wood, about the size of a large book, was pulled from the wreckage. It seemed to have gear wheels embedded in it, but it was so encrusted and fragile that it was simply catalogued and set aside in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. For nearly 50 years, it was labeled as a piece of an astronomical or navigational instrument, an uninteresting curiosity utterly overshadowed by the majestic statues. That changed in 1902 when a sharp-eyed museum archaeologist named Valerio Stais was examining the object. As he cleaned away some of the crust, he saw something impossible. There, clearly visible, was a precise, toothed gear wheel. More cleaning revealed another, and then another, all stacked together in a complex arrangement. Stais proposed this was part of an ancient astronomical clock, but his theory was met with immediate and widespread skepticism. The scientific consensus of the early 20th century was rigid. The ancient Greeks were brilliant philosophers and geometers, but they were not mechanical engineers. A device of such intricate, miniaturized complexity simply could not exist from that era. It was deemed an anachronism, a medieval astrolabe that must have fallen into the wreck much later. The mechanism, now named for the island where it was found, was dismissed and filed away once more, a puzzle too radical for its time. How could a single observation, so clearly visible, be so completely rejected by an entire generation of experts? The answer lies not in the gears themselves, but in the story we tell about human progress. The mechanism's true nature remained hidden for another half-century, waiting for a mind that could see past the corrosion. That mind belonged to a British physicist and historian of science named Derek de Solla Price. Beginning his investigation in the 1950s, Price approached the lump of bronze not as an archaeologist, but as a scientist. He understood that its secrets were locked inside, beneath centuries of mineral accretion. The breakthrough came when he arranged for the first detailed X-ray and later gamma-ray imaging of the artifact. The scans peeled back the layers of time, revealing a breathtaking sight. Inside that unassuming shell was a miniature universe of interlocking bronze gears, some as small as a coin, each with precisely machined triangular teeth. The images showed not just one or two wheels, but an entire clockwork cosmos frozen in time. Among the most astonishing finds was a specific assembly now known as a differential gear. This is a brilliant piece of engineering that allows two rotational speeds to be combined into a single output, calculating a difference. Before this discovery, historians of technology were certain the differential gear was an invention of the 16th century, used in sophisticated mechanical clocks and much later in the axles of automobiles. Yet here it was, embedded in a device that sank to the seafloor over 2,000 years ago. The implications were staggering. This was not a simple calendar or a decorative object. The differential gear proved the Antikythera mechanism was a computational machine. It could perform mathematical operations, modeling not just one celestial motion, but the complex interplay between them. Price's work, published in a landmark 1974 paper, forced the academic world to confront a reality it had long dismissed. A hidden chapter of ancient Greek technology, one of precision engineering and mechanical genius, had been silently waiting in a museum drawer. The conversation shifted from whether it was a computer to the far more thrilling question of what exactly it was built to compute. The Antikythera mechanism was in essence a user manual for the universe. For a civilization that saw divine order in the stars, this bronze computer offered a way to bring the chaotic dance of the heavens into a predictable, mechanical rhythm. Its central purpose was to model the most important celestial bodies with astonishing accuracy, particularly the sun and the moon, but the Greeks knew the sky was not perfect. They had observed, for instance, that the moon does not orbit Earth at a constant speed. Because its path is elliptical, it appears to speed up and slow down in a regular cycle. This anomaly, known as Lunar anomaly, was a problem for simple calendar models. The genius of the mechanism's design was that it solved this problem mechanically. A brilliant assembly of gears, including that revolutionary differential, precisely mimicked the moon's variable motion, making its predictions match the subtle irregularities of the real night sky. To unlock these secrets, a global team of scientists formed the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project. They employed a powerful technique called surface imaging, which uses reflected light to map the tiniest details of a surface without touching it. This technology acted like a time machine, allowing them to read inscriptions and markings that had been invisible for 2 millennia. What they found was an instruction manual etched in bronze. The words were Greek, and they described the device's functions. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable precision, not as omens of doom, but as calculable events. It tracked the 4-year cycle of the Pan-Hellenic Games, the ancient world's premier athletic festival, tying celestial time to human celebration. Most impressively, the front dials modeled the known planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, accounting for their perplexing retrograde motion where they appear to loop backward in the sky. With a turn of a hand crank, an ancient philosopher could witness the entire cosmos move in perfect, predictable harmony. This was not just a tool, it was a portable planetarium, a miniature cosmos in a box that demonstrated a universe governed by mathematical law. These inscriptions, carefully etched onto the inner plates and outer casing, were a direct message from the makers. For the modern researchers, deciphering them was like receiving a user's guide from antiquity. They worked from incredibly detailed scans, where each faint scratch in the bronze had to be identified and interpreted. The text was not a philosophical treatise, but a practical manual written in the common Greek of its day. It labeled the device's complex functions, guiding the operator through its celestial predictions. One crucial dial was marked for the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period that harmonizes solar years with lunar months, essential for keeping lunar calendars aligned with the seasons. Another was for the Saros cycle, a period of approximately 18 years after which the Sun, Moon, and Earth returned to nearly the same alignment, allowing for the prediction of eclipses. The mechanism could predict whether an eclipse would be solar or lunar, and even the time of day it would occur, but the language went beyond mere labels. It blended the technical with the poetic. One recovered fragment speaks of the mechanism as a sphere-making device, a reference to crafting a model of the cosmos. The names of the planets are given not just as points of light, but as divine entities, their Greek names inscribed beside the tiny gears that carried their simulated motion. This combination is telling. It shows the operators saw no conflict between calculating a precise eclipse and contemplating the celestial spheres. The machine was a bridge between numbers and mythology, between the tangible turn of a hand crank and the majestic, philosophical idea of a mathematically ordered universe. The inscriptions are the clearest voice we have from the creators, and they tell us this was built not just to calculate, but to teach and to inspire wonder. To understand how such a machine could be built, we must step into the world that forged it. This was not the Athens of classical philosophers, but the dynamic, interconnected Hellenistic era that bloomed in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquest. His empire shattered, but the fragments became glittering kingdoms from Egypt to Persia, all sharing a common Greek-influenced culture. For the first time, knowledge flowed freely across thousands of miles. Think of it as an ancient global network, where astronomers in Babylon could share centuries of celestial data with mathematicians in Greece, and engineers in Rhodes could collaborate with scholars in Egypt. At the heart of this intellectual explosion stood the legendary Library of Alexandria, a repository intended to hold all the world's knowledge. It was more than a storage house for scrolls. It was a think tank, a university, and a workshop all in one. Here, the greatest minds of the age were supported to think, debate, and invent without immediate practical constraint. It was an environment perfectly engineered for a leap from pure theory into mechanical reality. Within this context, the Antikythera mechanism stops looking like a miraculous outlier. It begins to look like an inevitable masterpiece. The astronomical principles it encodes point directly to the work of specific geniuses. Hipparchus, working in Rhodes a century before the mechanism sank, pioneered the mathematics of the moon's irregular orbit, the very problem solved by the device's differential gear. And then there is Archimedes of Syracuse, perhaps the greatest engineer of antiquity. Ancient texts describe him building intricate planetariums, bronze spheres that mirrored the motions of the heavens. While no direct evidence links him to the Antikythera device, its very existence proves that someone, or some team, had achieved what the legends said Archimedes could do. This was a culture obsessed with bringing order to chaos, with using geometry and mechanics to tame the complexity of nature. They had developed the theory of epicycles, a clever model where planets moved in small circles upon larger circles, to explain their puzzling retrograde paths across the sky. The Antikythera mechanism did not just calculate these paths, it physically manifested them in spinning bronze. Each turn of its crank was a demonstration of a profound belief that the universe operated not on the whims of gods, but on the unshakable laws of mathematics. So this device was no accident. It was the pinnacle of a technological tradition we are only beginning to appreciate, a tradition that sought not just to observe the cosmos, but to hold its perfect, ticking rhythm in the palm of your hand. This mastery of the cosmos was built one precise gear at a time. To truly grasp the genius involved, we need to look at one of the mechanism's most elegant solutions, a puzzle that had stargazers scratching their heads for centuries. They called it the Lunar Anomaly. If you watch the moon over many nights, you will notice something curious. It does not move across the sky at a steady, clockwork pace. Sometimes it seems to lag behind, and other times it races ahead, completing its cycle in a rhythm that is subtly offbeat. The ancient Greek astronomers, with their meticulous records, knew this was not an illusion. The Moon's orbit around Earth is not a perfect circle, it is an ellipse. This means the Moon's distance from Earth changes, and with it, its speed. When it is closer, it moves faster. When it is farther, it slows down. This is a gravitational effect, though they did not understand gravity as we do. They simply observed the irregularity and needed a way to model it mathematically, and in the case of the mechanism, mechanically. How do you build a machine with perfectly uniform gears to mimic a motion that is inherently variable? The answer lies in a small, breathtaking assembly of bronze. The designers created a device modern engineers call a pin and slot mechanism. Imagine two gears mounted on the same axle. One gear is driven by the main power source turning at a constant rate. Attached to this first gear is a small pin. That pin sticks out and fits into a curved, slot-shaped hole cut into the second gear. As the first gear turns, the pin moves along that slot. This simple interaction is where the magic happens, because the pin is not fixed at the center of the second gear. Its push and pull causes the second gear to speed up and slow down in a smooth, predictable cycle. It is a purely mechanical way to generate a variable output from a constant input. This pin and slot device functioned as an early form of what we now call a differential gear. You can think of a differential in a modern car, which allows the wheels to rotate at different speeds when going around a corner. The Antikythera Mechanism's version performed a similar conceptual trick, but for time instead of traction. It took the steady, average motion of the Moon and ingeniously imposed upon it the observed speeding up and slowing down. The result was a tiny bronze moon on the device's display that did not just go around in a circle. It traveled along its path with a lifelike hesitation and hurry, mirroring the real celestial body with an accuracy that would not be matched for over 1,000 years. They built a machine that breathed. With nothing but hand-cut gears and profound observation, they gave physical form to a cosmic irregularity, turning an abstract astronomical problem into something you could hold in your hand and watch unfold with every turn of a crank. For cultures that saw the sky as a divine message board, an eclipse was the ultimate terrifying portent. The sun or moon, a constant pillar of the world, would be devoured by darkness without warning. It was an event that shattered the natural order, interpreted by kings and commoners alike as a sign of a god's anger or a coming calamity. The ability to predict such an event was not merely a scientific achievement, it was a source of immense social and political power. Whoever could foresee the darkness could prepare the rituals to appease the gods, or even claim to have commanded the heavens themselves. This is where the Antikythera mechanism performed one of its most socially vital functions. It did not just calculate eclipses, it demystified them, turning cosmic terror into a scheduled entry on a bronze calendar. The key to this power was a celestial pattern known as the Saros cycle. Ancient Babylonian astronomers, meticulous record keepers of the sky, first identified this remarkable rhythm. They noticed that every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, the Sun, Earth, and Moon returned to almost exactly the same geometric alignment. This means an eclipse that happens today will be followed by a very similar eclipse one Saros cycle later. The pattern is not perfect forever, but it holds for centuries, creating a family of eclipses. The genius of the mechanism's designers was to encode this long, complex period into a physical machine. A dedicated dial on the back of the device, researchers believe, was laid out in a spiral pattern. A pointer would move along this spiral track with each turn of the main drive, marking the passage of months and years. Etched along this track were inscriptions, not just numbers but words. The surface imaging revealed cryptic notations like eclipse, sun, and moon. Some were even more specific, describing an eclipse as darkening or hiding, and noting the direction of the shadow's travel. Most remarkably, certain predictions were marked with the Greek letter sigma. Scholars believe this stood for the word Selene, or moon, indicating a lunar eclipse. This means the device did not just spit out a date, it provided a forecast. It could tell a priest whether the coming event would be a solar or lunar eclipse, its rough time of day, and even its magnitude or visibility from a Hellenistic perspective. This transformed the machine from a philosophical toy into an indispensable instrument of state. A temple official could consult the bronze computer, see an eclipse symbol approaching on the spiral dial months or years in advance, and begin the necessary preparations for the solemn ceremonies that would accompany the event. For a navigator planning a long sea voyage, knowing a period of celestial darkness was coming could be crucial. The mechanism took the unpredictable and made it orderly, replacing dread with foresight. In doing so, it didn't diminish the awe of the cosmos, it channeled that awe into understanding. The darkness was still profound, but it was no longer a surprise. But the mechanism's ambition reached far beyond the moon. On its main face, a grand display awaited the operator, a map of the cosmos in motion. Here, delicate pointers likely swept across dials inlaid with the symbols of the zodiac and the Egyptian calendar, tracing the paths of the 5 wandering stars known to the ancient world. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn did not follow the steady, predictable rhythms of the sun and moon. Their motion was a perplexing celestial dance. For most of the year, each planet would march steadily eastward against the backdrop of fixed stars. Then, for a period of weeks, it would slow, halt, and reverse course, tracing a bright loop in the sky before resuming its original direction. This retrograde motion had baffled observers for millennia. To model this complex back and forth path with nothing but rotating bronze gears was the ultimate engineering challenge of its day, and it is here we see the mechanism's most sophisticated and most tragically lost brilliance. The surviving fragments hint at how it might have been done. Researchers studying the X-ray scans have identified spaces and mounting points for gear trains that are completely missing. They hypothesize that these lost assemblies used a concept known as epicyclic gearing. Think of a small gear, an epicycle, mounted on the edge of a larger gear. As the large gear turns, carrying the small one around, the small gear itself also spins. If you attach a pointer to that small, spinning gear, its tip will not trace a simple circle. It will trace a series of loops, a perfect mechanical analog for the looping retrograde path of a planet against the stars. Each planet, with its unique orbital period, would have required its own carefully calculated set of these epicyclic gears, a miniature solar system of interlocking bronze. To get the math right, the builders did not rely on Greek geometry alone. They turned to centuries of precise observational data from Babylonian astronomers who recorded planetary positions with an accountant's meticulousness. The mechanism's design represents a profound fusion, marrying Babylonian arithmetic period relations, which gave the long-term average cycles, with Greek geometric models, which provided the physical theory of circular motion. This hybrid approach was then rendered into tangible, ticking reality. A turn of the crank would have set this entire miniature cosmos in motion, the pointers for each planet advancing, pausing, and gracefully looping back in a synchronized ballet of metal and mathematics. It was predictive astronomy made not just visible but tactile. You could literally feel the cosmos turn in your hands, watching the gods themselves, in the form of wandering points of light, obey the rules set down by human ingenuity. This front display was the showpiece, the proof that the chaos of the heavens was, in fact, a comprehensible and magnificent clockwork. Yet this cosmic calculator was also a profoundly practical tool for daily life. Beyond the grand motions of planets, the mechanism held a more grounded purpose, one that connected the heavens directly to the rhythm of planting, worship, and celebration. A key dial on the device's rear face reconciled two fundamental ways of marking time, the lunar month and the solar year. This was not just an academic exercise, it was essential for survival. The Greek world largely operated on lunar calendars where months began with each new moon, but the seasons, which dictate when to sow crops or sail the seas, are governed by the sun's yearly journey. A purely lunar calendar slowly drifts out of sync with the seasons, a problem for any agricultural society. The mechanism solved this with a dial tracking the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which the phases of the moon realign almost perfectly with the solar year. By following this cycle, a community could keep its lunar months in harmony with the solar seasons. To make this usable, the outer ring of this calendar dial is inscribed with the names of the months. But they are not Greek names, they are the names of the months from the Egyptian solar calendar, a calendar that maintained a fixed 365-day year. This is a brilliant piece of intercultural engineering. The Egyptian calendar provided a stable, solar framework, while the Greek lunar months could be mapped onto it via the mechanism's pointers. An official could look at the device and know, for example, that the lunar month of Hecatombean corresponded to the Egyptian month of Thoth, and that this alignment meant it was time for a specific harvest festival or a sacred rite to a particular god. The machine synchronized the celestial with the civic, turning astronomical cycles into a reliable schedule for an entire society. But perhaps the most human connection is found on a smaller, subsidiary dial. This one tracked the 4-year cycle of the Pan-Hellenic Games, the crown jewels of Greek athletic and religious life. The cycle included the Olympic Games at Olympia, the Pythian Games at Delphi, the Isthmian Games near Corinth, and the Nemean Games in the Peloponnese. Each of these major festivals was dedicated to a god, and they represented periods of sacred truce, when conflicts were paused so athletes, artists, and spectators could travel safely across the Greek world. The mechanism's tiny pointer would advance one space each year, indicating which set of games was upcoming. This feature transforms our understanding of the device's role. It was not locked in a philosopher's study, it was a tool for administrators, diplomats, and perhaps even wealthy travelers. Planning a journey to the Olympics from Alexandria or Rhodes was a major undertaking. Knowing precisely which year the games fell years in advance was crucial for logistics, for training athletes, and for the political maneuvering that always surrounded these grand events. By incorporating the games, the mechanism's makers embedded the pinnacle of shared Greek culture directly into its cosmic model. It declared that the same mathematical order that governed the eclipse of the moon also governed the sacred cycle of human competition and unity. This bronze computer did more than predict the stars, it helped orchestrate society. It linked the time of the gods with the time of the harvest, and the motion of planets with the gathering of crowds at a stadium. In its gears, the cosmos and the community turned together. The true marvel of this device lies not just in its design, but in its physical creation. Picture a small, sunlit workshop in a Hellenistic city, perhaps on the island of Rhodes. The air carries the sharp, metallic scent of hot bronze and the tang of wood shavings. The dominant sound is not of loud machinery, but of patient, rhythmic scraping as a craftsman uses a hand file to shape the triangular teeth of a gear wheel smaller than a coin. Every component of the Antikythera mechanism was a masterpiece of ancient materials science. The gears were not cast from common bronze, but from a special high tin alloy, chosen for its strength and resistance to wear. This bronze was carefully smelted, poured into molds, and then painstakingly finished by hand. The frame that held this cosmic clockwork was likely made of wood, possibly a fine-grained oak or cedar, providing a stable yet lightweight skeleton. The front and back plates, which bore the intricate dials and all those vital inscriptions, were thin sheets of bronze, engraved with stunning precision using sharp metal styluses. The entire assembly might have been housed in a wooden case, an unassuming box that concealed a miniature universe. the level of precision achieved is humbling. Researchers measuring the surviving gears have found their teeth were cut to within a millimeter of perfection. To achieve this, the artisans would have used tools like hand-powered lathes and bow drills, guiding them with an eye trained by generations of metalworking tradition. They possessed an intuitive understanding of tolerances and friction, knowing exactly how much clearance to leave between meshing gears so the mechanism would turn smoothly for decades without seizing. This was not the work of a lone philosopher, but of a collaborative guild. It required the metallurgist who knew the perfect alloy, the mathematician who provided the gear ratios, the master engraver who etched the tiny Greek letters, and the assembly specialist who fitted it all together. These anonymous engineer artisans are the forgotten heroes of this story. They were the vital link, the ones who translated abstract celestial cycles and complex geometric theories into tangible, ticking reality. They turned numbers into bronze and philosophy into a machine you could hold. Their combination of deep scientific knowledge and sublime craftsmanship represents a peak of human technical achievement that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. In that quiet workshop, amid the smell of oil and metal, they built not just a calculator, but a bridge between the mind and the cosmos. Yet the identity of its creators remains one of the mechanism's most compelling mysteries. Who were the minds behind this marvel, and where was such a workshop even possible? While we may never know a specific name, the trail of clues left in the bronze and the historical record points strongly to a vibrant intellectual hub. The most persuasive evidence leads us to the island of Rhodes. The Antikythera shipwreck was sailing along a well-known trade route from the eastern Mediterranean toward Rome, and Rhodes was a major center of commerce, astronomy, and advanced engineering in the 1st century before the Common Era. It was the home of the famed astronomer Hipparchus, whose lunar theories are so clearly embodied in the device's gears. More specifically, scholars point to the school of the philosopher Posidonius, a towering intellectual figure who ran an institution on Rhodes that was a nexus for science, geography, and technology. The style of the Greek lettering engraved on the mechanism's plates has been analyzed in detail. The forms of the letters, the specific grammatical conventions, and even the handwriting point to a craftsman educated in the Doric Greek dialect spoken on Rhodes and in Corinth. This linguistic fingerprint is a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence, suggesting the device's manual was written by or for someone from that cultural sphere. Furthermore, the mechanism's calendar uses month names from Corinth, another strong regional link. So the picture that forms is of a masterpiece born in a specific place and time, a product of the unique ecosystem of Rhodes where theoretical astronomy met world-class craftsmanship. It feels like a solid answer, but history always holds a more tantalizing, shadowy possibility. Centuries earlier, in Syracuse, the legendary Archimedes had earned a reputation for building extraordinary mechanical spheres. The Roman orator Cicero, writing more than a century after Archimedes' passing, describes 2 such devices brought to Rome as war trophies. One, he says, was a globe that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets, so exquisite that it captured the very eclipses of the moon. The description is hauntingly familiar. Could the Antikythera mechanism be a descendant of Archimedes' designs, perhaps built by later admirers working from his lost treatises? It is a captivating thought, linking the greatest mathematical mind of antiquity directly to this surviving artifact. The evidence, however, makes this a less likely origin story. The device's advanced gearing and specific astronomical functions align more closely with the state of knowledge in the 1st century before the Common Era, long after Archimedes' time. The Corinthian and Rhodian linguistic markers also point away from Syracuse, yet the legend persists for a reason. It speaks to a deeper truth we yearn to see, the lone genius whose spark illuminates the ages. The reality of the Antikythera mechanism is perhaps even more remarkable. It was almost certainly not the product of a single isolated mind, but of a collaborative tradition. The blend of Babylonian arithmetic, Greek geometry, Egyptian calendar names, and Corinthian month labels tells a story of pan-Mediterranean exchange. This was a device built at the crossroads of empires where scrolls from Alexandria, data from Babylon, and metal from Cyprus could converge in a Rhodian workshop. It represents not a flash of individual lightning, but a sustained, collective glow of knowledge passed down, improved upon, and finally rendered in bronze. The mystery of its origin, then, is not about a name we have lost, but about a world we are only beginning to understand, a networked ancient world capable of engineering a cosmos in a box. This breathtaking machine, a pinnacle of ancient thought, should have changed everything. Yet its story does not end with a triumphant legacy, but with a profound and unsettling silence. For over 1,000 years, no device of comparable complexity appears anywhere in the historical record. The sophisticated mechanical science it represented did not evolve, it simply vanished. How could something so advanced be so completely forgotten? The answer lies not in a single catastrophe, but in a slow cultural sunset. The vibrant, interconnected Hellenistic world that gave birth to the mechanism began to fade. The great centers of learning, like the library at Alexandria, faced periods of hardship and conflict, their vast collections of knowledge gradually scattered or lost. The rising Roman Empire, while magnificent engineers of aqueducts and roads, prioritized practical infrastructure over the kind of abstract, theoretical inquiry that fueled such devices. They admired Greek science as a prestigious ornament, but their drive was for conquest and administration, not for modeling cosmic cycles with intricate clockwork. Specialized craft knowledge is a fragile thing, passed from master to apprentice in quiet workshops. If the demand for such exquisite and expensive philosophical instruments dwindled, the guilds that built them would have faded within a generation or two. The Antikythera mechanism itself hints at this fragility. It was likely a unique or extremely rare masterpiece, commissioned for a temple, a royal court, or a wealthy scholar. Few would have had the resources or the need to create such a complex object. When the ship carrying it sank, that specific incarnation of knowledge was literally buried at sea. The loss of such centers and crafts meant the intricate dance of gear ratios and epicyclic theories retreated from the workshop back into the scroll, and eventually out of memory altogether. This forces us to confront a humbling truth about progress. It is not a steady, inevitable climb upward. Technological advancement is a fragile flame, easily snuffed out by shifting priorities, by the loss of a single library, or by a society turning its gaze from the stars to more immediate earthly concerns. The mechanism represents a brilliant path not taken, a demonstration that the seeds of a mechanical age were planted 2 millennia ago, only to lie dormant in the dark. The silence of the centuries was finally broken not by a new discovery, but by a new way of seeing. For decades, the Antikythera mechanism's corroded form had guarded its secrets, its internal complexity hidden like a locked library. The first key was X-ray vision. In the 1970s, Director Solla Price used gamma radiography to peer inside, revealing the ghostly outlines of those impossible gears. It was a revelation, but the images were flat and blurry, like trying to read a book through frosted glass. The true revolution would come at the dawn of the 21st century, when an international team formed the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project. They brought to the table a suite of imaging technologies so advanced, they essentially built a time machine for seeing. Their primary tool was microfocus X-ray computed tomography. Imagine a medical CT scanner, but one of incredible precision, designed to examine objects, not people. The mechanism was placed inside this device, and as it rotated, thousands of high-resolution X-ray slices were taken from every angle. A computer then assembled these digital slices into a perfect three-dimensional model. For the first time, researchers could virtually dissect the artifact without touching it. They could peel away layers of corrosion, isolate individual gear trains, and see how they meshed together deep inside the calcified lump. They could count the teeth on gears that hadn't seen light in 2,000 years, measuring their ratios with micrometer accuracy. This three-dimensional map revealed not just what was there, but also the empty spaces where crucial parts had disintegrated, allowing them to digitally reconstruct the complete machine. Yet the gears were only half the story. The true voice of the mechanism was etched onto its surfaces in faint, corroded Greek letters. To read these inscriptions, the team employed another brilliant technique called polynomial texture mapping. This process involves taking a series of high-resolution photographs of an object under raking light from many different angles. Specialized software then combines all these images, allowing a researcher to interactively manipulate the virtual light source on a screen. They could make the light skim across the surface at a shallow angle, causing the faintest scratches in the metal to cast long, readable shadows. It was like using the sun itself as a magnifying glass, illuminating text that was utterly invisible under normal museum lighting. With these tools, the team achieved something miraculous. They began to read the unreadable. Words emerged from the green patina, letter by letter, forming sentences that described the device's functions. They could see where a craftsman's hand had slipped while engraving, or where a later user had added a tiny mark. This was no longer just studying an artifact, it was having a conversation with it. The synergy was profound. 21st century digital technology, born from silicon and code, became the perfect key to unlock a 2,000-year-old computer made of bronze and intellect. Each scan, each virtual light angle, was like wiping a clean cloth across a dusty window, finally revealing the stunning clarity and ambition of the ancient world's greatest mechanical mind. The ghostly images from the scans presented a new kind of puzzle. Researchers now held a three-dimensional map of a shattered machine, but they still did not know how all its pieces were meant to move together. To solve this, they had to bring the mechanism back to life, not in bronze but in code and plastic. Pioneers like London Science Museum curator Michael Wright took the first bold steps. Using the early radiographic data, Wright spent decades meticulously engineering a physical replica. He machined each gear by hand, solving the mechanical logic of the missing parts through trial and error, proving the device could be built with the tools of its time. His working model was a revelation, a clattering, ticking testament that the design was not just theoretical, but brilliantly functional. But the full digital revolution was still to come. A team from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece took the high-resolution tomography data and embarked on an even more ambitious project. They began constructing a complete virtual model inside sophisticated computer-aided design software. This was an iterative detective story in silicon. They would propose a configuration for a lost gear train, perhaps one governing the elusive motion of Venus. The software would then animate their hypothesis, spinning the virtual gears through thousands of simulated years. The output, a string of dates and positions, was then checked against historical records of planetary alignments and eclipses meticulously preserved by Babylonian and Greek astronomers. Most proposals failed. The digital gears would jam, or their predicted celestial events would drift out of sync with history. But then came the eureka moments. One such breakthrough centered on a famous solar eclipse. The team modeled a proposed layout for the Saros cycle dial. They set the virtual date to a specific point in the past, the morning of May 12, 205 years before the Common Era. They set the simulation in motion. As the digital pointers advanced, they watched as the eclipse prediction marker aligned perfectly with that exact historical date. The machine had spoken across 22 centuries. Their digital reconstruction had not just assembled gears, it had successfully retrieved a calculation performed by the original device over 2 millennia ago. This was definitive empirical proof of its intent and its accuracy. The virtual model became a time machine in its own right, a tool that allowed researchers to sit at the shoulder of an ancient operator and witness the cosmos unfold as they saw it. Today, anyone can download these simulations or watch videos of physical replicas in motion. We can all turn the crank and watch Mercury begin its slow, looping retrograde dance across a dial of zodiac signs. This accessibility transforms the Antikythera mechanism from a distant mystery into a shared experience. We are no longer just studying an artifact, we are operating it, feeling the weight of its predictions and the elegant certainty of its design. The silent, corroded lump in the museum case has found its voice again, not in bronze, but in the universal language of mathematics and motion, inviting us all to witness the ancient world's most sophisticated thought, made tangible once more. But could this cosmic calculator have also guided ships across the open sea? The very context of its discovery, a Roman merchant vessel laden with treasures, invites this tantalizing question. Was the Antikythera mechanism a practical navigational instrument carried aboard to help that ancient captain find his way? The device certainly possessed the core astronomical data a skilled navigator would need. By tracking the sun's position through the zodiac and predicting the risings and settings of key stars, it could, in theory, help determine latitude, a ship's north-south position. For a mariner leaving the sight of land, such celestial knowledge was the only reliable map. Yet when historians and engineers weigh this idea against the physical reality of the device, significant doubts emerge. The mechanism is a masterpiece of precision, but it is also delicate. Its fine bronze gears, some thinner than a coin, would have been vulnerable to the constant vibration, salt spray, and corrosive humidity of a wooden ship at sea. A single storm or a careless drop could have jammed its intricate workings irreparably. Furthermore, operating it required a stable surface, careful cranking, and the light to read its tiny inscriptions, conditions nearly impossible to maintain on the rolling deck of an ancient merchant galley, especially at night when the stars were out. The arguments from practicality are compelling. This was not a rugged tool built for the harsh, hands-on world of seafaring. Its complexity suggests it was meant for contemplation, not for the urgent, wet-handed work of navigation under the stars. So if it was not a mariner's direct tool, what was it doing on that ship? A more likely possibility is that it served a vital but shore-based purpose. It may have been the ultimate educational device, a demonstrative model used in the academies of Rhodes or Alexandria to train the minds of future navigators and astronomers. In a quiet lecture hall, a master could use the mechanism to illustrate the predictable patterns of the night sky, teaching students the relationship between the calendar, the constellations, and the seasons. A navigator who understood these cycles from first principles, who had watched them play out on this bronze model, would carry that knowledge in his head out to sea, needing only a simple sighting tube or his own practiced eye to find his way. The mechanism then becomes a symbolic bridge. It represents the sophisticated theoretical knowledge that underpinned the empirical art of ancient navigation. It was the textbook, not the compass. Its presence on a luxury-laden ship bound for Rome might indicate it was itself a precious cargo, a magnificent demonstration of Greek learning, perhaps destined for a wealthy patron's library or a Roman scholar's collection. It embodies the very knowledge that made long-distance trade possible, even if it was not the instrument that directly steered the ship. So while its gears probably never turned to the rhythm of ocean waves, they may well have guided generations of minds to understand those waves, turning the chaotic sea into a chartable, knowable space. The gears of the Antikythera mechanism spin in a historical vacuum, a lone survivor from a shipwreck of time. But was this device truly a miraculous one-off, or is it the single, precious fragment we have of a much larger and now vanished tradition? To answer that, we must look at what came after and listen to the whispers in ancient texts. In the centuries following the mechanism's sinking, simpler geared devices do appear in the historical record. Byzantine and Islamic artisans crafted beautiful astrolabes and even small geared calendars, like the elegant 9th century device found in a shipwreck near Sicily. These are marvels in their own right, but they are fundamentally different. They are calculators, not computers. They lack the integrated complexity, the differential gears, the ability to model variable motions and interlocking cycles. They represent a parallel but less ambitious strand of mechanical thought, one that preserved the basic idea of the gear, but seemingly without access to the profound astronomical models that powered the Antikythera masterpiece. This gap points to a startling possibility. The mechanism may not have been the pinnacle of a continuous tradition, but rather the last echo of a much older one that had already fractured and faded. This idea finds support in the curious attitude of the ancient Greek intellectual elite themselves. For many celebrated philosophers, the highest pursuit was pure theory, the contemplation of perfect geometric forms and celestial spheres. The messy, practical work of building machinery was often seen as a lower craft, unworthy of the philosopher's lofty mind. The great Aristotle himself drew a sharp distinction between theoretical knowledge and the manual labor of making things. This cultural bias may have created a disconnect, where the deepest astronomical insights were recorded on scrolls, while the mechanical genius needed to embody them in bronze resided in separate, less celebrated workshops. The Antikythera mechanism is powerful precisely because it bridges that divide. It is the physical proof that someone, somewhere, was ignoring that prejudice and uniting abstract theory with sublime craftsmanship. And the surviving texts hint they were not alone. The Roman author Cicero, as we heard, described planetariums built by Archimedes. Other writers mention automated theaters and mechanical wonders in the courts of Hellenistic kings. These are not detailed blueprints, but they are consistent echoes of a world where complex machines were not just imagined but built. The Antikythera mechanism, then, is our only tangible evidence. It is the one concrete piece that proves the whispers are true. It suggests a hidden stratum of ancient technology, a layer of applied mechanical genius that connected the dots between mathematical principle and physical machine. Most of this stratum is lost, its devices likely melted down for their bronze, or left to corrode in forgotten storerooms. What we have in that Athens museum case is not an anomaly, but a survivor. It is a single page rescued from a vast, burned library of ancient engineering. Its very existence compels us to reconsider the technological landscape of the ancient world. It was not a flat plane of simple tools leading inevitably to our modern age. It contained peaks of astonishing sophistication, mountains of knowledge that were later eroded by time, conflict, and shifting cultural winds. The mechanism stands as a monument to a path that was explored with breathtaking brilliance, then tragically abandoned, leaving its secrets to sink beneath the waves for over 1,000 years. The crank's smooth rotation offered more than a prediction. It offered a profound philosophy made tangible. To turn that handle was to engage with a radical idea that the cosmos was not a realm of capricious gods, but a magnificent, predictable machine. This bronze device materialized a concept Greek thinkers had pondered for centuries, the notion of a universe governed by cosmos, a word meaning both order and beauty. Before this, the wandering planets were literally named after deities: Mercury the swift messenger, Venus the goddess of love, their erratic paths seen as the direct actions of living, divine wills. The mechanism presented a stunning alternative. Here, those same celestial gods were reduced, or perhaps elevated, to pointers on a dial, their complex dances dictated by the unwavering turn of interlocking gears. It translated myth into mathematics. The machine did not deny the sacredness of the heavens, but it redefined that sacredness as residing in perfect, intelligible law. A user could witness Mars begin its puzzling retrograde loop, not because the god of war was angry, but because a small bronze epicycle gear had reached a certain point in its rotation. This was a silent, mechanical argument for a deterministic universe, a clockwork cosmos running on principles that could be understood, calculated, and physically modeled. The experience must have been deeply contemplative. Holding this box, you weren't just observing the sky, you were holding a piece of its logic. You could feel the resistance of the gears, hear the soft click of teeth engaging, and see the inevitable consequence unfold. It made abstract philosophy something you could literally grasp in your hands. This mechanistic worldview, fully realized in bronze, would lie dormant for ages. Yet the seed was planted. Over a millennium and a half later, when thinkers like Isaac Newton looked up and described a universe governed by universal gravitation and mathematical laws, they were articulating a principle the Greeks had not just imagined but had once built. The Antikythera mechanism stands as a quiet, profound testament to a very old dream, that the universe, in all its splendor, ultimately makes sense. The Antikythera mechanism shatters a comforting story we often tell ourselves about human progress. For generations, the history of technology was taught as a steady, linear climb from simple tools to complex machines, with the great leaps forward occurring in the European Middle Ages and the Renaissance. According to this familiar timeline, intricate gearwork was the innovation of medieval clockmakers in the 14th century. The sophisticated astronomical calculator, the analog computer, these were marvels of the 17th century, the age of Galileo and Kepler. This narrative places our modern mechanistic worldview as a relatively recent awakening. The corroded gears from a Greek shipwreck force us to redraw that entire chart. They are an undeniable data point, a peak of engineering that existed 2,000 years before it was supposed to. This is not a minor adjustment, it is a fundamental disruption. It proves that the conceptual leap from observing the cosmos to building a physical model of its mathematical laws did not happen in a Parisian workshop or an English manor, but in a Hellenistic city over 2 millennia ago. The mechanism stands as a cornerstone, the one surviving piece of evidence that forces us to reconceive the ancient intellectual landscape. We can no longer view Greek science as purely theoretical, confined to geometry on sand and philosophy in scrolls. This device reveals a parallel tradition of breathtaking mechanical sophistication, a hands-on engineering genius that was directly applied to the deepest questions of the universe. It shows us that empirical observation and mechanical invention were intertwined far earlier and far more deeply than the standard history admits. The timeline of innovation is not a smooth, upward slope. It is a rugged terrain with isolated peaks, some of which were so high they were later shrouded in mist and forgotten. The mechanism is one such peak, now revealed, forcing us to acknowledge that the seeds of the scientific revolution were not planted in the 16th century, but were sown and once flourished in the ancient world. This changes how we see every subsequent invention. When a medieval monk builds a clock tower with complex gears, we must now ask, is this a brilliant new beginning, or is it a distant, fragmented echo of a knowledge that was once whole? The mechanism suggests that engineering insight can be lost, can lie dormant for centuries, and can be rediscovered along different paths. It introduces the idea of technological dead ends and forgotten golden ages into our story of progress. Our appreciation for ancient capacity must expand to include not just the Parthenon's architecture or Euclid's proofs, but also the miniature cosmos ticking away inside a wooden box. This artifact does more than predict eclipses. It predicts a humbler, more complex, and far more interesting history of human ingenuity. Think of a student in a sunlit courtyard on Rhodes, struggling to visualize the celestial spheres described by his teacher. Words and diagrams on papyrus could only go so far in explaining the moon's variable speed or the perplexing loop of Mars. Then the master brings out a wooden box. With a turn of its side crank, the entire classroom leans in. This was the transformative power of the Antikythera mechanism as an educational instrument. It was not merely a calculator for priests or a curiosity for the wealthy. It was a revolutionary teaching tool, the ancient world's most advanced interactive model. In an era without projectors or animated simulations, this device offered something priceless, a dynamic, three-dimensional representation of cosmic principles. A static diagram of the zodiac is one thing, but watching a pointer sweep across those same engraved symbols, tracking the sun's real-time journey through the constellations over the course of a year, makes the abstract vividly concrete. The teacher could pause the motion, point to a specific gear train, and explain how this set of wheels mathematically generates the Saros cycle for eclipses. The student could then take the crank and feel the resistance of the gears, witnessing the cause and effect directly. This tactile, visual experience transformed learning from passive reception into active discovery. Complex cycles like the Metonic, which harmonizes sun and moon, became not just a number, 19 years, but a physical process you could watch unfold across a dial. The mechanism made the secrets of the universe accessible, demystifying the heavens by rendering their laws in bronze and wood. For the elite learner in a philosophical school, it bridged the daunting gap between the perfect circles of geometric theory and the messy, observable reality of the night sky. It answered the question of how, with a satisfying mechanical click. In this role, the device becomes more than a technological marvel. It becomes a key to a lost pedagogical world, where understanding the cosmos was a hands-on journey. The fragments rest now in a quiet, climate-controlled case in Athens, a world away from the storm-tossed seafloor. Their current state is a silent testament to 2,000 years of slow, chemical conversation with the sea. The bronze, once gleaming and precise, is now a landscape of green and brown mineral crust, a rocky shell that has both protected and concealed the delicate machinery within. This corrosion is not a surface stain, it is a fundamental transformation. The metal has expanded and mineralized, fusing gears to their axles and plates to their frames in a crystalline embrace. What was once a dynamic computer is now a single, fragile mass, where the finest details are locked away beneath layers of geological time. For conservators, this presents an agonizing dilemma. Every flake of that crust holds potential information, a chemical record of the object's long journey. Yet inside that crust lies the truth of its design. The challenge is a race against a different kind of clock, the relentless, invisible chemistry that continues even in the museum's air. Too much moisture and the corrosion accelerates. Too little and the delicate, mineral-stabilized fragments could crack and crumble. The climate-controlled case is a battlefield perimeter, maintaining a precise balance of humidity and temperature to slow time itself, to hold this window into the ancient mind open for as long as possible. Any attempt to go further, to separate fused gears or clean away more crust, is a monumental risk. Modern tools like micro-drills and ultrasonic scalpels can work wonders, but they are irrevocably invasive. Each decision is weighed with profound care. Does the potential knowledge gained from exposing one more gear tooth justify the permanent loss of the surrounding corrosion layers, which themselves are a historical document? It is a discipline of profound patience and humility, where the goal is not to restore the device to a shiny, new-looking state, but to stabilize its current condition for the next generation of researchers. They are stewards, not restorers, knowing that technologies we cannot yet imagine may one day allow us to see deeper without touching at all. Their work is a quiet, ongoing act of faith, preserving not just an object, but a conversation with the past that is far from over. The silent artifact in its museum case holds its secrets close, but around the world, those secrets have found a new voice in spinning metal and plastic. To truly grasp the Antikythera mechanism's genius, you need to see it move. This is why researchers and enthusiasts have dedicated themselves to a remarkable act of resurrection, building full-scale working replicas that translate ancient calculations into a live performance. Michael Wright's decades-long project culminated in a stunning brass model, each gear painstakingly machined by hand to prove the design was not just plausible, but brilliantly functional. When he turns the crank on his replica, the dials spring to life, pointers sweeping across zodiac signs and eclipse predictions aligning with historical dates. It is a clattering, ticking symphony of ancient thought, a physical argument that this was all possible, but the fascination doesn't stop with academic models. The mechanism's elegant logic has inspired versions built from unlikely materials, most famously in Lego. An ingenious build using hundreds of standard plastic bricks and gears proves the underlying mechanical principles are universal, a puzzle that can be solved with patience and understanding, whether your workshop is in ancient Rhodes or a modern living room. When these replicas are demonstrated to the public, the reaction is always the same, a collective intake of breath followed by awed silence. Watching those delicate pointers begin their dance, seeing the moon's pointer speed up and slow down in its mechanical orbit, makes the abstract tangible in a way no textbook description ever could. It transforms the device from a historical footnote into a shared experience. A child can turn the crank and watch planets loop, connecting directly with an idea conceived 2 millennia ago. These reconstructions do more than illustrate a theory, they create a bridge of wonder. They allow us to stand beside that ancient operator and witness the cosmos unfold as they saw it, not as a static image, but as a living, ticking model of reality. In the smooth turn of a handle and the graceful sweep of a bronze pointer, the genius of the past becomes a captivating performance for the present. Despite the brilliant digital reconstructions and working models, the Antikythera mechanism still holds its deepest secrets close. Decades of intense research have answered many questions, but for every mystery solved, another seems to open up, reminding us how much we still do not know. The most tantalizing gap concerns the planetary displays. We have strong evidence from the surviving mounting points and gear spaces that the front face modeled all 5 known planets. But the exact gear trains, the specific ratios and arrangements that drove Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn in their elegant loops are largely lost. We can propose configurations that work mathematically, but we lack the physical evidence to say with certainty which one the ancient engineers actually built. This is like having the blueprint for a magnificent engine but missing the pages that detail the camshaft. The digital models can show us a plausible solar system, but they cannot yet show us the precise one that spun inside that wooden box. This leads directly to the next haunting question. Was this device truly one of a kind? Given the staggering investment of knowledge and craftsmanship it represents, it feels unlikely to be a solitary experiment. Historical texts mention other intricate spheres and models. Could there have been an earlier version, perhaps simpler, that served as a prototype, or later, more refined models that were lost to time, melted down for their bronze or destroyed in the conflicts that ended the Hellenistic age? The silence of the archaeological record is deafening. Not a single other geared device of comparable complexity has ever been found from the ancient Mediterranean world. This absence is itself a powerful statement. It suggests that such pinnacles of technology were incredibly rare, perhaps numbering only in the handfuls, treasured possessions of the most powerful kings or the greatest academies. Their survival rate over 2 millennia was understandably almost zero. Then there is the mystery of its physical presence. We have the intricate guts of the machine, but we are missing its skin. What did the complete device actually look like when it sat on a scholar's table? The wooden case, the protective doors that likely shielded the delicate dials, the possible decorative elements, all of this has vanished, consumed by the sea. The front and back plates are fragmented, leaving us to guess at the full artwork of the cosmos that was once displayed. Were the dials inlaid with silver or gold to highlight the pointers? Was the case inscribed with the owner's name or a dedication to a muse? These details would transform the mechanism from a technical diagram into a complete artifact of its culture, blending art, science, and personal identity. The most promising avenue for answers may still lie where the story began, on the dark seafloor off Antikythera. The original salvage operation in 1900 was rushed and dangerous, recovering only a portion of the wreck's cargo. Modern expeditions have returned with robotic submersibles and advanced mapping tools, painstakingly surveying the site. They have found new treasures, including a second, seemingly younger shipwreck nearby. Most intriguingly, they have recovered additional, smaller bronze fragments that may belong to the mechanism itself. Could more pieces, perhaps a crucial gear assembly or a section of the case, still be buried in the sediment? The hope is palpable. A single new fragment with a few more engraved words or a unique gear could unlock entire chapters of the mechanism's story that are currently written in blank spaces. And that is precisely why this ancient computer remains so vitally alive. It is not a puzzle that has been solved and put away. It is an ongoing conversation between the past and the present. The unanswered questions are not failures of research, they are its fuel. They drive engineers to build new replicas, historians to scour old texts for overlooked clues, and archaeologists to plan the next dive. This enduring mystery ensures the Antikythera mechanism is more than a relic. It is a perpetual invitation. It invites us to wonder, to investigate, and to remain humble before the vast, forgotten capabilities of those who came before us. The search for its final secrets continues, a quiet testament to our unending desire to understand a genius that once held the cosmos in its gears. The Antikythera mechanism has transcended its origins as a museum piece to become something far greater, a cultural icon that speaks directly to our modern imagination. It has appeared in best-selling novels as a key to ancient conspiracies, starred in award-winning documentaries that peel back its layers of mystery, and even inspired episodes of popular science fiction television, where it often serves as a plot device representing a technology far ahead of its time. In these stories, it is more than a machine, it is a symbol, a tangible piece of a forgotten golden age. For artists and writers, it embodies the poignant idea of lost knowledge, a brilliant light that was extinguished, leaving the world in a long twilight. It represents the fragility of civilization itself, a reminder that the pillars of understanding we take for granted can be eroded by time, conflict, or simply a shift in what a society values. This artifact has become a powerful metaphor for complex systems, a miniature clockwork universe that helps us visualize everything from ecological networks to the flow of information in the digital age. Its very existence challenges the linear story of progress, suggesting instead a cyclical pattern where insights are gained, lost, and rediscovered along different paths. This notion resonates deeply in our own era of rapid technological change and concern over preserving digital legacies. The mechanism inspires scientists to look for other anachronisms buried in the historical record, urging archaeologists to reconsider what might be possible. It sparks artists to create sculptures and installations that blend ancient forms with modern materials, meditating on the timeless human urge to map the cosmos. For dreamers and innovators, it serves as a profound permission slip. It asks us to reconsider the boundaries of ancient capability and, by extension, to question the limits we might be placing on our own. If a civilization 2,000 years ago could encode the motions of the heavens in bronze, what does that say about the potential for human ingenuity when curiosity, resources, and collaboration align? The mechanism's journey from a corroded lump to a global icon is a story about our own need to find meaning in the past. It reflects our hope that genius is not a fleeting accident, but a latent capacity, and that understanding a forgotten masterpiece might help us build a future that remembers all its lessons. The future of this ancient computer is being written now, not in libraries but on the dark seafloor where it was found. International teams are preparing to return to the Antikythera wreck site with a new generation of tools. Imagine autonomous robotic submersibles equipped with high-definition laser scanners and metal detectors, hovering silently above the sediment. These machines can map the entire debris field in 3 dimensions with millimeter precision, creating a virtual excavation site that archaeologists can explore from the safety of a ship's laboratory. Their goal is to sift through layers of sand and time, searching for the missing pieces of the puzzle. Could another fragment of the mechanism's casing, perhaps bearing a crucial inscription, still be buried there? Might there even be remnants of a second device, a companion piece lost in the same disaster? The possibility, however remote, electrifies researchers. Every speck of bronze recovered from that specific context could be a new sentence in the mechanism's long silent story. Beyond the dive site, the fragments in Athens continue to whisper. The current surface imaging has read the outermost layers of text, but the inscriptions may go deeper, etched into the bronze itself before corrosion sealed them away. Future advances in imaging, perhaps using subtle variations in X-ray absorption or terahertz radiation, might one day act as a non-invasive archaeology, peeling back the mineralized layers one by one to reveal lines of text currently fused into the crust. Each recovered word, each verb or numeral could clarify a disputed function or even name a maker. This work is no longer the domain of a single expert. The path forward is fundamentally interdisciplinary, a collaboration across centuries. Physicists build computational models to test thousands of possible gear arrangements against known astronomical data. Computer scientists develop algorithms to digitally reassemble fragments based on break patterns and wear marks. Historians of language, known as philologists, scrutinize every stroke of the engraved Greek, comparing it to other texts to pinpoint its dialect and era with even greater accuracy. Materials scientists analyze the unique bronze alloy, tracing its composition to specific ancient mining sources. This convergence of fields turns the mechanism into a nexus point, where a question about gear teeth becomes a question about ancient trade networks, and an inquiry into a glyph becomes an insight into Hellenistic education. The promise this holds is profound. The final chapter on the Antikythera mechanism has not been written because we are still learning how to read its language. Every few years, a new scan, a new simulation, or a new fragment offers a fresh clue, recalibrating our understanding. It stands as a permanent reminder that the past is not a locked room, but a landscape we view with ever sharper lenses. The next revelation may be hidden in a speck of corrosion no bigger than a grain of sand, waiting for the right light to see it by. That lump of corroded bronze, once dismissed and forgotten, has rewritten the story of human invention. Its journey from a museum drawer to a digital reconstruction reveals an ancient computer of staggering ambition, a device that could predict eclipses, track planets, and harmonize calendars with mechanical grace. This single artifact stands as undeniable proof of an advanced engineering tradition in the Hellenistic world, one that married precise astronomy with exquisite craftsmanship long before such feats were thought possible. It challenges the very timeline of progress, demonstrating that the seeds of a mechanistic world were planted over 2 millennia ago. The Antikythera mechanism is more than a tool. It is a testament to an enduring human drive, to not only observe the cosmos but to hold its intricate rhythms in our hands. As scientist Tony Freeth reflected, it was a computer in the same sense that it was a machine for computing predictable astronomical phenomena. It represents a breathtaking intersection of art, science, and philosophy, a physical manifestation of curiosity that spanned continents and centuries. This device invites us to marvel and then to wonder, what other echoes of ancient genius are still waiting, silent and patient, for our curiosity to find them?